Welcome to part 42 of the Basic Training Booster Pass Edition. Today we're going to cover everything you need to know to play DK Mountain on 150cc. This is an incredibly difficult course to optimize, so we're going to start with the recommended build of Peachette, Teddy Buggy, Azure Rollers, and Paper Glider. Hold down the item button during the countdown so that you can use a mushroom as soon as the run begins, and then build up a couple mini turbos, starting with a counter hop left drift into a right drift. 2 super mini turbos is faster than a single ultra mini turbo, so that's what we're going to do around this long left turn here. But do note that the time save is fairly minimal and the timing can be kinda precise. After that, we're going to come up on a cannon glider, and you all know what that means by this point. Hop on top of the glider ramp, which will make your glider come out faster, saving about 1/10 of a second over tricking. Now, this glider is really weird. It's one of the only examples I can think of where holding a 2-ish o'clock or upright angle on the joystick actually seems to help you save time. I haven't really tested this out much myself, but I took a clip that one of the people in my Discord posted and I shared it with Alberto, who said, and I quote, "Some cannons are very jank." Speaking of this cannon being very jank, you want to come out of this glider and land in a right drift, but there's this really weird thing you can do to save time where just before you land, you hold down and right on the joystick. It saves about 1/10 of a second, and I have no clue why. After that, we are on to the mountain proper, and we're going to start with the rocky portion of the downward slope. On lap 1, we're going to make this easy and just trick off all the ramps, sticking to the right hand side of the track so that we can take a tight line around the right turn. Unfortunately, from here on out, there's really no such thing as easy strats if you want to make it through here with anything resembling speed. Start a left drift and tighten up until just past the coin lines, at which point you're going to basically hold wide until you've built up a super mini turbo. You'll get a little bit of air time, and it's at this point that you want to start holding down the drift button and right on the joystick to land in a right drift. If you did it right, you should take a really tight line around this first right turn, but you'll probably need to brake drift a bit to make this work. Here's how that sounds. Now we're coming up on the gap cut. It's really not that tricky to learn as long as you've got a good setup. What I do is after that first right drift, I start a left drift and immediately widen up a bit. Then, take a super tight line around the left turn while brake drifting a little bit. And then just before getting to the coin lines, release and do a left hop. After that left hop, do a wide right drift. You don't need to necessarily go all the way up the wall on the left, but you do need to widen up enough to make sure that with some brake drifting, you can shift your cart to be facing directly towards the little ledge overlooking the gap cut. This is because you're going to want to do a left drift off of this ledge so that you can charge mini turbos in midair. And then when you land on the other side of the gap, you can take a tight line around the final left turn of the lap. But do make sure not to start that left drift too early, otherwise you'll go over the off-road and get massive air time. It's important to keep in mind that when you're doing all this, you're going to want to brake drift around the hairpin turn just prior to the gap cut, and also when coming down from the wall just before the cut itself. Pay attention to the brake sounds to get a sense of how this is supposed to work. It's a little bit weird to learn, but once you figure it out, it's more or less 100% consistent, and it's honestly going to be the least of your worries on this track. Believe me, you're going to see exactly what I mean in about, well, right now actually. After building up a super mini turbo, or preferably an ultra mini turbo, we're going to enter one of the most awful pieces of cycle-based tech in the entire game. Second only to maybe that Yoshi's Island question mark box. This bridge waves back and forth from left to right, and every time you go off a peak, you can get a trick. Unfortunately, these waves move really quickly, and so the best way to do this is just a shake trick. However, unlike pretty much every other situation in the game where shake tricking is the optimal way to go, you need to be really careful here, because it's possible to get 2 trick animations immediately one after the other. And if this happens, it not only delays the trick boost, but it also slows you down a bit before you even get the boost. So you kinda have to shake only as much as you need to for each individual boost. If that wasn't bad enough, the fastest way through here is to get 3 perfectly spaced boosts. This is pretty straightforward if you get to the bridge when the peak on the right hand side is close to the entrance, but if it's not, well, I got nothing for you. If you watch the world record, you can see that it is definitely possible to get 3 trick boosts even on quote-unquote bad cycles, but in my hours upon hours of attempts at this course, I wasn't able to get the 3 trick setup even once when the cycle looked like this. Each failure to get 3 trick boosts costs about half a second, by the way, so that's pretty cool. Anyways, after that, we are finally on to lap 2. It's mostly the same as lap 1, except for that first big downward slope where when going off the last ramp, we're going to purposely go even tighter than we did before and land in a drift off the top of the mountain. This will allow us to hold a hard drift in midair to charge a super mini turbo by the time we land. I'm not sure how much time this actually saves, but the world record does it and it looks badass, so, gotta go for it. Just make sure not to go too tight or else you'll run into this wall on the right. Now, as for why we didn't do this on lap 1, it's because you have to be going fast enough to actually make it to the top of the mountain in the first place, and using these more beginner-friendly strategies for the downward slope makes it very difficult to get this consistently unless you have enough coins, which we just aren't going to have on lap 1. That being said, there is a way to get this consistently even on lap 1, but it requires that we start taking a look at some more advanced strategies for the downward slope. In particular, after getting the Ultra Mini Turbo, instead of tricking, we want to start a left drift in such a way that we land on this slope on the right, bounce off, hit the ramp, and charge a Super Mini Turbo in midair by continuing to hold the drift button and left on the joystick. It probably goes without saying how unbelievably precise this is, and doing it perfectly 3 laps in a row is a task that would make even Sisyphus go, man, f this. However, after about 10 hours of attempts, I finally figured out that the key to this is to start that left drift as soon as you get the Ultra Mini Turbo. I say this because for me, my brain kept overthinking the timing and I was trying to aim for specific spots on the wall of the ramp. But it really is as straightforward as soon as you get the Ultra Mini Turbo, start that left drift. Now the nice thing is that we don't necessarily need to get it perfectly because what actually ends up saving time here is how this sets us up for the next part of the strategy. What you want to do is land in a right drift, build up a mini turbo, and then mini turbo trick off the ramp to get some extra speed, driving to the left of this barrel and then heading straight towards the coin immediately on its left before tricking. Yes, we're going to be going a bit wider than our beginner-friendly strats to start, but approaching the cut from this angle ends up giving us an even tighter line than before. This one strategy saves about a full second per lap, maybe even more, so if you're going to practice anything extensively, I highly suggest that it be this. The only other real difference in strategy between the easier strats and my personal best is that we're going to start off with a right drift into a double hop right drift, since this still lets us charge 2 mini turbos but take a slightly more direct line to the turn before the cannon glider. I should also point out that this and the shortcut off the top of the mountain require some pretty precise mini turbo timing, which is why we've switched over to Bitty Buggy instead of Teddy Buggy. Now we haven't talked about mushroom strats yet, and that's because there's really not a great place to use your mushrooms on this course. What I do is charge a couple mini turbos and then mushroom through the grass to take a slightly tighter line. The world record starts the mini turbo shenanigans as soon as they come off the bridge, and then on their second right drift they use the mushroom to cut through the mud before starting the left drift. This lets them do the double super mini turbo strat on lap 1 just like before, and is also probably a more direct line to the cannon glider than what I do. Anyways, that's it for the strats. Let's talk about the track a bit more while checking out my current personal best. And as always, if you found the video helpful so far, dropping a like pushes the video to get spread to more people, which is by far the best way to help out the channel. So if you could do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Now, DK Mountain. You know, by all accounts, I should really hate this track. It's really long, there's no mushroom shortcuts to speak of, and the gap jump is just prime real estate for spammy item nonsense. And it's got a cycle-based obstacle that can cost multiple seconds over a course of a run if you hit it badly. But the thing with this course is that it's kind of like Waluigi Stadium, where the skill ceiling is super high, and it's very easy to see consistent improvements the more time you put into the track. So time trialing it extensively can actually be enough to help you mitigate some of the disastrous effects of getting Mario Karted online. Now forgive me for this, but we're going to make a quick digression here to complain about DK Summit some more, since Lord knows I will never not have something bad to say about that absolute turd of a track. One of the things I find so frustrating about time trialing DK Summit is that for the shortcut, clearing the double gap jump itself isn't that tricky, but if you don't land right on top of the orange boost ramp on the other side, you're losing like half a second per lap. Easy. Not only that, but the fastest setup for the double gap jump requires insanely precise lines that are full of blind turns and narrow paths, and this all just makes pulling this off online a crapshoot at best. And so it almost ends up not even being worth it to learn the optimal strats at all. Instead, just opting for slower but much more consistent strategies. In contrast, at least as far as I can tell, everything on DK Mountain is more or less 100% consistent, aside from the weird bridge tricks at the end. And in my more than 100 attempts at the course, never once did I feel robbed or cheated out of a good time. Every time something went wrong, I immediately knew what it was that caused me to fail, and this allowed me to constantly see improvements on the track. I'm going to give something of a hot take here, which is that even though I'm not nominating this course for Mario Kart Track of the Century or anything, particularly for the reasons I already listed at the beginning of this run, aside from Daisy Cruiser, I can't think of another track in the Booster Course Pass that I so thoroughly enjoyed learning as I did with DK Mountain, and I honestly think this might be my favorite track in the entire Booster Course Pass. And that's everything you need to know to play DK Mountain on 150cc. As always, before you go, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any one of my tutorials. Thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to do some basic training, and as always, I will see you in the next video.